Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dominique Kaufman, and today we're going to be looking at the pearl clutching of the righteous and Christian new right in response to some of President Trump's rhetoric as of late, including the blasphemous AI photo he retweeted of him essentially healing and being Jesus. The manufactured moral Christian outrage, it's a pseudo-Christianity of the new right. I think, yes, you can 100% be outraged by the photo I'm about to show you, although I'm sure you have seen it. However, the way this is being used is to propagate this idea that Christians and Muslims actually have more in common, that we should build a Christian-Muslim coalition in opposition to Judeo-Christian values. This is really important when we're looking at new right pundits such as Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson. This is all part of a political campaign and propaganda, a psyop of true Christianity and conservatism to liken us with Islam and to make Christianity and Islam the mutual enemy of the evil Jew that Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson are trying to make you believe is a threat to your faith and way of life. I promise you, Islam is a significantly greater threat. Trump finally did call out the new right media pundits. I know why Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones have all been fighting me for years, especially by the fact that they think it is wonderful for Iran, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, to have a nuclear weapon, which is true. They've all advocated for a policy of appeasement and capitulation to the regime and blamed Israel for it. They have one thing in common: low IQs. They're stupid people. They know it. Their families know it, and everyone else knows it too. Look at their past. Look at their record. They don't have what it takes, and they never did. They've all been thrown off of television, lost their shows, or aren't even invited on TV because nobody cares about them. They're nut jobs, troublemakers, and will say anything necessary for some free, cheap publicity, which it is true. All of them have lost shows on their major networks, whether it be Candace Owens on the Daily Wire or Tucker and Megyn Kelly at Fox News. And then, Megyn left Fox News, but at NBC, she lost her show for low ratings. They think they get some clicks because they have third-rate podcasts, but nobody's talking about them, and their views are opposite of MAGA. That is true. They are opposite of MAGA. Unfortunately, I think they yield significant influence, which should not be downplayed within the GOP. Or I wouldn't have won the presidential election in a landslide. MAGA agrees with me and just gave CNN a 100% approval rating of Trump. Not hand-flailing fools like Tucker Carlson, who can't even finish college. He was a broken man when he got fired from Fox, and he's never been the same. Perhaps he should see a psychiatrist. Or Megyn Kelly, who nastily asked me the now famous only Rosie O'Donnell question. Or crazy Candace Owens, who accuses the highly respected First Lady of France of being a man, when she is not, and will hopefully win lots of money in the ongoing lawsuit. Actually, to me, the First Lady of France is a far more beautiful woman than Candace. In fact, it's not even close, which to me tells me that President Trump fully understands the motivations of Candace Owens, which she's a deeply jealous and insecure woman. Thought that was hilarious. Or bankrupt Alex Jones, who says some of the dumbest things, so true, and lost his entire fortune, as he should have, for his horrendous attack on the families of Sandy Hook, ridiculously claiming it was a hoax. These so-called pundits are losers, and they always will be. Now, fake news, CNN, the failing New York Times, and all of the other radical left, quote, news organizations are hailing them and giving them positive press for the first time in their lives. They're not MAGA. They're losers, just trying to latch onto MAGA. As president, I could get them on my side anytime I want to, but when they call, I don't return their calls because I'm too busy on world and country affairs, and after a few times, they got, quote, nasty, just like Marjorie Taylor Brown. But I no longer care about that stuff. I only care about doing right for our country. MAGA is about winning and strength in not allowing Iran to have nuclear weapons. MAGA is about making America great again, and these people have no idea how to do that. But I do, because the United States is now the hottest country anywhere in the world. President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so yes, a lot of this is true. However, I think downplaying their influence is a bad idea. And of course, this is kind of clickbait, classic Trump rhetoric. These individuals are very strategically picking off key and influential people of the GOP to create a robust coalition against MAGA, and that should not be understated. Let's look at what Tucker Carlson had to say about the now highly rebuked tweet of the AI photo of Trump purporting himself to be like Jesus. Incredibly blasphemous, very Paula White in theme. I don't support this. This is blasphemous. And I can condemn this without siding with the Tucker, Megyn Kelly coalition that is now clutching their pearls at how blasphemous President Trump is. The left, which blasphemes Jesus and the Bible every single day with their policy prescriptions, the things that they say, and their lifestyles, are also echoing criticism of President Trump. I'm sorry, excuse me. If you're not a Christian and you don't live a Christian life, and your life is actually lived in opposition to the word and is antithetical to the gospel, don't use manufactured outrage to push your political agenda. To those on the new right, it is also equally as blasphemous to use this to peddle the idea that the Jesus of the Bible, the true Savior, God incarnate, one of the Godheads, 3 in 1, is the same as Islam's prophet Jesus, or that Islam and Christianity are actually so much more alike than Judaism and Christianity. This is what Tucker Carlson had to say. The people in charge don't want you to know this, but Muslims love Jesus. Literally said like a true Muslim. Muslims love to propagate this. Islam reveres him as a major prophet and messenger of the Lord. Well, they don't believe in the Lord, they believe in Allah, which is not the same as Arabic for God, but it's not our God. Believes he performed miracles and states that he will return to earth to defeat the Antichrist. That's why Donald Trump's painting depicting himself as the son of God offended the president of Iran. It was an attack on his religion as well as Christianity. Again, likening our interest to the president of Iran's in the name of a shared faith and shared religious outrage to this blasphemy. Absolutely disgusting on the part of Tucker Carlson. This is significantly more blasphemous, in my opinion. Not that two blasphemies should ever be compared or one's better than the other, but in the name of calling out blasphemy, he's peddling anti-Christian propaganda for a religion that is antithetical to the gospel, that kills Christians at a rate that no other religion in the world does. Making a defense for a Christian-Muslim alliance is blasphemy. The irony of using President Trump's blasphemy and rebuke him to only then peddle much more theologically detrimental claims is evil. It's literally evil. This is Tucker Carlson being an agent for confusion and lies. He is an agent for the enemy. Today's Morning Note newsletter covers President of Iran's condemnation of Trump's desecration of Jesus, the Iran war's gutting effects on America's housing market. The war hasn't happened long enough from an economic standpoint for it to have affected the housing market. Yes, the cost of gas has gone up. Still, by the way, $4.16 a gallon to $5 at the peak of the Biden administration. So we're still not seeing inflation at the rates we did in 2022. The Strait of Hormuz is now reopened because of the double blockade. President Trump called the Iranian regime's bluff, which was their only negotiation chip left because the regime is completely decimated. Tucker is very strategically appealing to the emotions and the outrage of your average blue-collar conservative, right? He's saying, look, the president of Iran is just as outraged as you are about this blasphemous depiction of Jesus. And actually, he worships the same Jesus as you. So your interest with the Islamic world is actually aligned. And then he throws in that the war in Iran has had effects on the housing market. An emerging policy issue of the right is the concern of young Americans not being able to buy houses. So he's also appealing to your fear that not only are your interests intrinsically aligned with the Iranian regime, that, by the way, kills converts to Christianity. Iran is home to the largest underground church in the world. It used to be China. It's not underground for fun. It's underground because if you convert to Christianity, if you evangelize the gospel, you will be killed. If you are caught disseminating Bibles, you will be killed, executed. But Tucker's trying to make you believe that that very same regime is a liken to you spiritually, and that going to war with them not only targets a regime aligned with your religion, but that it negatively affects your everyday life, and not being able to buy a house is just one of those negative externalities. We haven't been at war long enough to feel those market shocks. Making this war the reason you can't afford a house is sheer propaganda. Now let's listen to Megyn Kelly's moral outrage and pearl clutching, which, by the way, again, I'm not here to speak on anyone's actual faith. I can tell you right now, Candace Owens is not a Christian by the fruit that she is bearing. I can also tell you that Tucker Carlson is not a Christian with the propaganda that he is peddling. Megyn Kelly herself has said that she's questioned at least her Catholicism, and she pointed to her annulment with her first husband and that process as one of those reasons. I wouldn't necessarily say Megyn Kelly's worldview is justified by her Catholicism. From watching her for over a decade, I get the sense that Megyn Kelly is a cradle Catholic. But unlike someone like Ali Bestecki, her faith has never been incorporated into her political worldview or her analysis. And I'm not speaking to her personal conviction, but typically if you're deeply convicted about something, it permeates all aspects of your worldview or analysis, of which it's never really been a big part of Megyn Kelly's.
Has picked up a new feud with Pope Leo the 14th. Seems like a great time to start a feud with a Catholic Pope. I will be the first to tell you the Pope has been critical of this war. I'm Catholic, obviously. He's been critical of this war. And as he's been critical of it, it occurred to me that it was just a matter of time before President Trump would lash out at him. And he did. So it wasn't great. It was predictable. And no Catholic loves this, but you could see it coming. And it's hard to say that Trump is completely out of line, because whenever he gets attacked, whether it's by a journalist or a talking head or a pope,
meaning me, whenever he's attacked by me,
he punches back. All right. You could definitely question the wisdom of doing this with, President Trump leads a nation of 330 million people. Pope Leo leads about 1.4 billion Catholics across the world. But President Trump doesn't care. He doesn't, and he wouldn't even care if the majority of Americans were Catholic, which they're not, but he would. This is what he does. If he perceives you as coming at him, he will come at you. So he lashed out last night at the pontiff on Truth Social, writing in part, quote, "Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy." I mean, he's not a politician. Okay, whatever. "I don't want a pope," writes Trump, "who criticizes the president of the United States, because I'm doing exactly what I was elected in a landslide to do." Are you, Mr. President? Were you elected to start another Middle East war? I don't think so. President Trump reiterating his criticism.
Yes, Megyn. Much of MAGA, the true MAGA base, supports the war that's happening. In fact, it's not even a war. It's a military operation. The success of this operation is sweeping. So to say that the American people didn't elect President Trump to protect American interest is asinine. We sure as hell didn't elect him to prop up or capitulate to a regime that seeks to destroy us or our allies. A huge missing component in this, and again, I don't want to focus on the war in Iran because that's sidetracking, has really nothing to do with what we're talking about, is Iran has ballistic missile capabilities, and they are building intercontinental missile capabilities. That is a far more imminent threat to the United States and to our NATO allied countries in Europe than a nuclear weapon. Everyone keeps talking about nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction because it echoes back fears of Iraq in 2003, which again is a very different conflict, and I'm going to do a video on that. But intercontinental ballistic missiles means that Iran could hit Miami or New York or Washington, D.C. And then what? And then we start to respond once they have the capabilities to hit our homeland? A foreign war abroad is a preferred war. Megyn and Tucker, what is the alternative? We wait until they strike us in 4 years, 5 years? That's a larger scale war. That's a war that comes at the cost of civilians and U.S. civilians.
I don't think he's doing a very good job. He likes crime, I guess. He hit us thick of it. He's worried about fear. What about the fear when the ministers and the priests and all of those great people that were arrested during COVID, and in many cases they're outside 10 feet apart, and they were arrested. So we don't like it. We don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime. He's a man that doesn't think that we should be toying with a country that wants a nuclear weapon so they can blow up the world. I'm not a fan of Pope Leo.
Now, it's not entirely clear what spurred Trump's wrath, but it does appear the president was made aware, in addition, I'm sure, of the recent criticism by the Pope, of a 60 Minutes report last night on the Pope's and the Catholic Church's opposition, first of all, yes, to the Iran war, but to war in general. The Catholic Church has been pretty clear on that. No one's tried to sugarcoat the Catholic Church's opposition to war. They're pretty big on Jesus and his teachings, which do not include promotion of war.
Almost every pope has taken a pacifist position to war. That is not new. That is pretty much the status quo of the church. But that's false, saying that Jesus is anti-war. Jesus is vehemently anti-evil. The gospel sits in opposition to evil, of which the regime is evil. Just war sits perfectly within the Christian ethos. War happens to be part of the fall. We are sinful individuals. War has been what has driven history forward for all of human civilization. To become a pacifist in a global age when our military capabilities are far greater than they have ever been throughout all of human history is such a weird position to take. Pacifism to war doesn't stop evil. It's a green light to a regime like Iran to continue to inflict violence and evil and murder and oppression upon their own people and the region. To somehow suggest that Jesus would prescribe pacifism to a radical extremist ideology that is killing his believers, his children, is the most ungodly and theologically faulty prescription that you could give to this conversation.
But here's a sample of what we saw in 60.
This past week, he issued a rare condemnation of President Trump's threat to destroy Iranian civilization. The Pope called it, quote, truly unacceptable. He also took the unusual step of issuing a call to action.
Contact the authorities, political leaders, congressmen, to ask them, tell them to work for peace and to reject war always.
The Holy Father usually avoids calling out President Trump by name or any member of his administration. But in a Palm Sunday homily, he appeared to reference the religious language Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who is Christian but not Catholic, often uses to frame the war.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle.
Pope Leo warned that Jesus, quote, does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war.
Okay, it is a little, it feels off that Pete Hegseth keeps praying at these briefings that he's doing as if it's all in the name of God. The bombing of Iran.
Okay, again, Iran kills converts to Christianity. They oppress the underground church. The regime takes an active policy of persecuting Christians. So as a Christian, why is it wrong for our Secretary of War to pray? I'm just curious. And again, for the Pope, I find it so incredibly hypocritical that at his Palm Sunday homily, he failed to pray for the genocide in Nigeria and the death of our Christian brothers and the death of our Christian brothers and sisters at the hands of radical extremism and Boko Haram. That seems much more aptly on topic in condemning the killing of our brothers and sisters than rebuking a war of which no civilians have been targeted, of which no Christian population has been targeted. So we have the Pope and Christians like Megyn Kelly rebuking a war that has completely decapitated the IRGC, which not only suppresses evangelizing, but kills anyone evangelizing, distributing Bibles, or those who the regime views as an apostate converted to Christianity. This is a regime that is in bed with Qatar, that runs its propaganda for the regime. Algeria, which is not friendly to the Christian narrative or voice. Qatar, which doesn't even allow for Christianity legally. Unlike what Tucker Carlson says, they allow for their slave workers from Indonesia and Southeast Asia to worship, not freely and openly, but in essentially compounds that are prisons, and no Qatari national is able to worship. The lack of Christian moral clarity is astounding, and beyond that, the propagating it is evil. The IRGC are the only entities that have been targeted, as well as their military and nuclear facilities. Civilian infrastructure has not been hit. So what exactly are you condemning, if not to prop up the regime? I haven't heard Megyn Kelly outraged by the actual genocide happening in Nigeria. So strange, because that would require her to condemn political Islam, radical Islam, of which she seems not only unwilling to do, but it goes against her agenda to defend it.
In which, 170 young girls were killed. That's not in the name.
I knew that was going to come up. Yeah, the IRGC was hiding behind that school. So I include those casualties in the 45,000 killed by the regime.
Name of God, okay? Definitely not in the name of Jesus. I wish you would just check the Jesus talk, the God talk at the Pentagon briefings. All right, it's called the Department of War. I understand he has a job to do. It's not appropriate there. You pray on Sunday, pray every morning on your knees to God. But while you're updating us on the number you've killed, which necessarily has included some civilians, we don't mention Jesus. Don't talk about God. Don't act like he's sanctioning what you're doing, okay? And that leads me to President Trump's obvious.
Okay, so you can't sanction God to morally defend your war aims, but Megyn Kelly and the Pope can use God to denounce it, even though there's no clear theological or biblical precedent for that in light of all the horrific things the IRGC has done. That's so interesting. That's a double standard, Megyn. You just contradicted yourself in less than a minute.
Misstep over the weekend. It wasn't the clapback at Pope Leo. I mean, I've been through this before. I was a Catholic back when he was attacking Pope Francis during his first run for office. And now it's Pope Leo. You just knew it was coming. It was like TikTok. You knew it was coming. But what we didn't know was coming was this absolutely absurd, offensive meme, AI-generated version of a picture showing Donald Trump as Jesus. He tweeted this out, posted it on Truth Social. I'm sure you've seen it by now, but if you haven't, for listening audience, it is President Trump as Jesus with his hand on the head of a sick patient in bed and a demon behind him and a light glowing around him. It is obviously him purporting to be God. That is what he's doing. And it is blasphemous by any definition of that word. I actually just looked it up just to have it at the ready. I mean, blasphemy is irreverence towards sacred entities. But here's a longer definition: the act of showing great disrespect, contempt, or defiance toward God, sacred persons, or holy things, insulting, mocking, or slandering the divine. That's what he's done. It's completely inappropriate, and he knows it. I don't know why the president's getting so desperate for attention that he feels the need to mock 1.4 billion Catholics. It's enough, okay? It's enough with this nonsense. I know you love getting a rise out of people. I know you're really enjoying being subversive. You upset all the right people. I get it. But, why? Last week it was Muslims. Now it's Catholics. Who's next? I bet you it's not going to be the Jews. It's not going to be the Israelis. I promise you that.
Biggest eye roll ever. Because again, when you don't have much of substance to say, you throw the Jew in there so that you can manufacture moral outrage over quite literally nothing within your base. And mocking Islam. Tucker also was outraged that he would mock the Ayatollahs and the mullahs, that they were going to go to hell, essentially, if they didn't come to the negotiation table, which, by the way, that is biblical. They don't believe in Jesus. They live a life antithetical to the gospel. They persecute Christians unless within their final breath they accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior and denounce Islam. They are going to go burn in hell. That's biblical. So I find it also so strange that Megyn and Tucker would be outraged by that if they are truly Christians. Okay, before I get to that, I thought it was interesting talking about blasphemy and the conversation with the Pope. So let's look at that really quick. So while all of this controversy is happening, Pope Leo goes on his tour of Africa, of which he was in Algeria. He visited the Great Mosque of Algiers at the first day of his 11-day tour of Africa. He said he is traveling, quote, as a witness to the peace and hope that the world so ardently desires. He visits the mosque, which is the third largest mosque in the world, and the Book of Honors, with the message, may the mercy of the Most High keep in peace and freedom the noble Algerian people and the whole human family. Okay, so blasphemy to visit a mosque? No. However, to normalize interfaith dialogues and elevate it to the message that me and you are one and the same, which is exactly what Tucker Carlson is also proposing. So I find it so interesting that as we're condemning the operation in Iran, which again has been highly discriminate against a regime that persecutes Christians brutally, and then going to a mosque, the third largest mosque in the world, in Algeria, of all places, and pray for mercy on the Algerian people and for peace and to normalize relations with a country that persecutes Christians is not only unhelpful, it feels like a betrayal of our Christian brothers and sisters. Again, his Palm Sunday service didn't talk about the Nigerians being killed by radical Islamists in Nigeria, did it? And then he, following Easter and in all this controversy, goes to Algeria and elevates Christianity and Islam to being capable of interfaith dialogue when Islam is a religion that is antithetical to Western norms of diplomacy and interfaith dialogue to begin with, in a country that persecutes Christians is wild to me. This is according to Open Doors. It tracks persecution across the world for Christian populations. The persecution type in Algeria: Islamic oppression, dictatorial paranoia, clan oppression, and ethno-religious hostilities. Over the past 3 years, state pressure on Protestant Christians in Algeria has intensified to levels unseen in decades. Authorities have kept previously closed churches shut and ordered others to cease, so they've restricted Christian worship. As a result, all 47 churches under the Evangelical Protestant Church of Algeria have halted their activities, and other independent churches have also stopped meeting due to fear of government action. These closures have strongly increased isolation among Algerian Christians, who are mostly converts from Islam. In addition to church closures, more than 50 Christians have been prosecuted in recent years, with some receiving suspended prison sentences and fines, so lawfare against Christians, and apostates, according to the Islamic worldview, converted to Christianity, especially in rural, conservative, and Arab regions, where pressure and dangers are particularly acute. So I would propose to the Pope that instead of advocating for interfaith dialogue with a religion, and specifically a country that is known for oppressing Christians, he should advocate for at least the religious freedom and liberty of his fellow believer. The apostate prophet, who I absolutely love, who's now a believer, responded to Tucker and said, Muslims believe Jesus was never crucified, never died, nor resurrected, and that any Christian who believes in his divinity and sonship will go to hell forever. Muslims also believe Jesus will come as a Muslim prophet to break the cross. Tucker doesn't want you to know. Stella also highlights how this is part of, and what I've been talking about, Tucker Carlson's larger psyop of the new right, which is to liken Christendom's interest with the Islamic world, because his interests are now tied with the Islamic world. How convenient. This, again, is a new idea pushed by Tucker Carlson. The base has never moved. This is Tucker Carlson's contrarian opposition to true conservatism.
See Tucker now saying the people in charge don't want you to know this, but Muslims love Jesus. Yeah, the people on the alt-right, like Tucker, are trying to pretend Islam and Christianity are compatible and that Islam is the protector of Christianity, as if we haven't seen church after church burned to the ground by these Muslim extremists. I don't know, let's just talk about Lebanon, for example. Once had a huge, thriving Christian population, civil war broke out. What followed? Mass exodus of Christians, many killed. This is not just history. It's happening in different parts of the world right now. And should we not believe imams when they say this?
The Quran, chapter number 9, verse number 29. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the Muslims to kill the Christians, Jews, and if they do not surrender, then they have to pay jizya.
By the way, this isn't a one-off. There are so many videos like this. Just go look. Tucker, by the way, has white privilege, and he wants us to disbelieve the imams and what is actually happening.
Even how Tucker opens the quote, the government doesn't want you to know this. He's appealing again to that post-COVID-19 suspicion of the established narrative. And that suspicion is what he's using to galvanize his base to believe these radically blatant lies about the West, about our moral positioning in the world, about our position abroad as a force for good in the face of anti-Western imperialism, which, by the way, China, Russia, and Iran all prescribe to a foreign policy ambition to expand or export their country's hegemony, in the case of Iran, their revolution. But Tucker wants you to believe that America is an evil Western colonial power, borrowing from Marxist language. And to be clear, even the fact that we as Christians believe that Jesus Christ is the second person of the Trinity, 2 in 1, is blasphemous to Islam. That position, that point alone emphasizes the inherent difference between the Jesus, the true Jesus of the Bible, and of Islam, the counterfeit Jesus. In fact, the entire impetus for Islam, according to Muhammad, was that the Jews and Christians had perverted their text, and that was the reason God needed to reveal new revelations to Muhammad. So the entire purpose of Islam is because, according to Islam, Christianity got it wrong. They view our belief in Jesus as a figure of the Godhead to be blasphemous. The jizya tax that imam mentioned is what Christians and Jews, who throughout all of history under Islamic rule, have shared in persecution as people of the book, oftentimes paying a jizya tax, an extra tax to be protected. There's a robust history to demonstrate that Islam is antithetical to both Judaism and Christianity. So this new propaganda of trying to get us to divorce Judaism. And what's their number one thing they love to cite theologically? Well, they say in the Talmud that Jesus is burning an excrement in hell. Okay, first, the Talmud's not a holy text. It's rabbinic interpretation. And that's one rabbinic interpretation of a not holy text, right? Of Jesus. And the entire reason the Jews betrayed God is because they don't believe in Jesus. Yet in that very same breath, we are going to embrace the actual holy text of the Quran that says to kill Jews and Christians, which is authoritative, unlike the Talmud. And even though they reject the divinity of Christ, we're brothers and sisters with Islam. This is sheer propaganda. It is a pseudo-Christianity. And just to drive the point home about Tucker Carlson's allegiance to Islam, let's hear him praise Sharia law, which again, Sharia law foundationally embraces all of the legal code of the Quran, including killing the Jews and the Christians.
Sharia law is bad, Seth. I don't know if you've heard that. It's bad. It's worse than what's happening in New York and Detroit. It's just bad. I don't know why. It's just like years of brainwashing. I just like travel so much that I see it. There's not a single Western city that's thriving. And they're all degrading in exactly the same way. I'm not Muslim. I'm not for Sharia law. On the other hand, compared to what? Compared to Baltimore? You know, shut up.
That's something that Tucker does often, is he'll create a false dichotomy. Detroit, which is run by Democrats, is a hellhole, sure. But that doesn't mean the Western world and Christianity is morally declining. The cities that are thriving that he loves to juxtapose to Detroit would be like Doha or Dubai, which are Arab cities that have embraced Western ideas and capitalism in order to attract the Western world. But is Damascus thriving? Is Beirut thriving? Is Tehran thriving? I think not. There are 50 Muslim countries, of which many individuals live below the global poverty line. Young girls can be sold at the age of 9 in Afghanistan as child brides. Female genital mutilation is a practice seen throughout the Arab world. In Afghanistan and other parts of the Arab world, bakabazi is a practice where men play with young boys sexually, maybe even sodomizing them as they dress them up as little girls. So when Tucker laughs and that little demon comes out of him and says, is Detroit better to what? Compared to what? Well, compared to raping little boys, marrying little girls off to adult men at the age of 8 or 9. Because again, why wouldn't they? Their divine prophet Muhammad married Aisha and consummated the relationship when Aisha was 10 years old. So if the divine prophet demonstrated in the Quran and you're to follow his ways, then that doesn't seem as radical to the Muslim world. Compared to all of that, Tucker, I would even say Detroit is still a walk in the park compared to the Muslim world and the Muslim ethos, politically, culturally, socially. But again, he's trying to propagate a place like Doha and make that seem like this outlier is the norm. And notice he commits the fallacy of composition. He'll take one bad city in America, he'll take one bad political actor, and he'll characterize the entirety of Western civilization by that one city or by that one policy. And then in the inverse, when he's trying to make a case for Sharia, he takes the exception of Dubai or Doha as exceptional cities, flourishing cities, clean cities, which, by the way, is because if you steal in Doha, they'll cut your arm off. Their criminal system is run by Sharia law, so it's a bit more of a deterrence, although I'd rather live in a society where free will is allowed to flourish and there be imperfect examples of the justice system than to live under totalitarian Sharia law. But he'll take the exception, not the norm for the Arab world, and then characterize the entire Arab world by that one better example. It's blatant propaganda.
Because I travel outside the Western world, the white world. I'll just be honest, the white world. Right. I travel a lot in the Middle East. It's amazing. It's amazing. Whatever it's worth, a pretty fervent Christian, and I feel completely comfortable here in the seat of Islam. But you go to the Gulf, and it's incredible to be in a place that has pride in itself, that believes in its religion and culture, that thinks we're onto something. And this is great. Look at what we're doing. We're really proud of this. Those people are happy, they're welcoming of others, they're tolerant of diversity, where they're into things that I'm not into, like, I don't know, polygamy or Islam. And I can sort of look at it and be like, no one's forcing this on me. I'm not mad at you for being a polygamist. He's like, you know what Islam means?
They're open to diversity, like polygamy. Okay, yeah, in the Arab world, that's not diversity. That's the status quo, Tucker. And I also find it so ironic, right? So the moral decline of the West, according to Tucker Carlson, is the sexual degradation of our society through things such as OnlyFans or pornography. Yet I would define polygamy as sexual perversion as well, but then that's apparently evidence of their diversity and pluralistic embrace. Islam is regressive.
Submission. I don't think I'm against that, actually. Anyone who submits to God, like, I'm just for that.
If you have a society in which people bow down before God 5 times a day, I'm not against that. I should bow down before God 5 times a day. And I wish I lived around people who bowed down before God 5 times a day.
The Emirates or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, and you see that when people are self-confident, when they're really pleased with what they're doing and they believe that their system is the right system, that self-confidence results in a kind of welcoming attitude.
That self-confidence is what brings organizations and groups of them to pillage the Western world, to burn our churches down, and to enact terror in the West. When he talks about God with Islam and Christianity, he conflates those gods as the same thing. And then notice when he talks about the Jewish God, those are different. And that's probably best on display when he talks about Amalek in his interview with Ambassador Mike Huckabee. He was referencing a quote made by Benjamin Netanyahu where he said, remember Amalek. Well, Amalek basically genocided the Jews in the Old Testament. He was a horrendous adversary to the Hebrews. So Netanyahu was saying, don't forget those who have done us wrong. Well, Tucker Carlson completely propagated that and said that Bibi was using the story of Amalek to justify his, quote, genocide in Gaza. And then he goes on to say, what God advocates for genocide? So he clearly distinguishes that the God of the Jews, the Old Testament, is a different God than Christianity. But when he talks about the God of Islam, he conflates those as one and the same In fact, going so far in that tweet I showed you to say that Jesus is just as important in Islam, which is theologically false. The fact that you can make the claim that the God of the Old Testament, which is the same God that we worship in the New Testament, because without the God of the Old Testament and without the Israelites, there is no need for a Messiah. Christianity necessitates the Old Testament. Without it, there is no Christianity. Okay? So then for Tucker to say that the God of the Old Testament was calling for genocide, which is an indictment on the character of God in the Old Testament, the same God he purports to worship as a Christian, is blatantly blasphemous. Pearl clutching that Trump would post an AI photo that was blasphemous, which again, I do not support. But the response to it and the righteous indignation by someone who blasphemes God regularly with the ideas he espouses is nothing but sheer propaganda. In closing, Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, even the Pope haven't talked about the 53 who were killed on the Palm Sunday massacre in Nigeria, again at the hands of Boko Haram. A what? Oh, an Islamic fundamentalist organization. So crazy that Tucker says there are brothers and sisters, but do they treat us with reverence like we're their brothers and sisters? Our very existence, they view as blasphemous to God. The foundational belief of Islam is that we got it wrong. And from that, their civilizational values, which have social and political implications, are antithetical to Christendom and the West. So enough with the propaganda that we are one and the same. With that, I will leave you and I will see you in the next episode.